Hey guys, we're coming back. We're starting to buckle down and get down to this November races and see who's who here in Knox County at least. We're almost in agreement, almostagreement@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube. You can go to our website, almostagreement.com. That's where I got my voter guide 22, and you can get a link to this show and everybody else that I've interviewed so far. And I'll add links as I add more shows in this series of races and stuff like that. So we got through the August race. That was the big crazy one. There was too many things on that ballot. We get to slow down and have, I don't know, I think we'll have like 7 items. Most people in Knox County will have like 7 items on this ballot coming up, including the actual ballot initiative stuff. So we'll talk about that at some point too. Anyway, go to your favorite podcast provider, give us a like, share, friend, follow, tell everybody about it. We're going to keep working through candidates and do what we do. We're going to let this intro run out, and Amanda and I are going to chat. All right, Amanda Collins, District 14. Let's start with a brief history of you. Give me, I don't know, a 5 to 12 minute wee baby to adult running for office.
Okay, thank you for being specific for that. And also thank you for having me on for sure. I always hate it when people are like, tell us a little bit about you. And I'm like, well, do you mean like my favorite color, or do you
Sure,
mean
I like it all the
my
way.
favorite
Like
relative? But you said from a wee
from a
baby
wee baby
to
to yeah.
candidate. I grew up in northeastern Alabama, in the same mountains that we're in now. With family that had been in the area for quite some time themselves. Uh, Grew up with a younger brother and a lot of extended family. We did have, um, my parents got divorced when I was 4, and we at that time, I don't know if you're really aware, but it's a little scandalous for a woman to have divorced her husband in the early 80s in Alabama. And so it got pretty interesting. And luckily, thankfully, we had various family members who kind of helped my mom get on her feet to get into school and get into uh, getting her degrees and getting her job. But at that, during those years where she was working on that, we were technically homeless according to how, for example, Knox County Schools defines it now, which is not necessarily unhoused, but not in your own house. So we lived with my maternal grandparents and then my maternal aunt for a few years while my mother was in school. And because my grandparents had both recently retired and were on a fixed income, um, we were on benefits here and there for a while I was um, in school. But at the same time, we had a very generous extended family member who put my brother and me into a church affiliated private school for our elementary years. So we had this really interesting um, dichotomy in our lives between our private school life and our um, hand me down thrift shop, uh, the um, the grocery store on Sand Mountain that has the expired food life, and then um, these other opportunities that we had in our elementary school. But we did go into the public schools, um, starting in middle school. I came up through all of that. I was very much a fairly typical overachiever, good at school, involved in all the things. We were very heavily involved in our Southern Baptist church as a family, particularly in their music program. Um, those types of things. I graduated. I was a national merit finalist, and I could have gone to Vanderbilt with that and been a national merit scholar, but instead I chose to go to Berry College. It's in Rome, Georgia. Are you familiar with it?
I'm not.
It- It's a small private liberal arts uh, Christian affiliated college that is on the largest campus in the United States. It's 28,000 acres in the northwest Georgia mountains, and it is gorgeous and it's amazing. It's a very unique experience. Um, and I majored in, and I had to make a decision, and this was my choice. I had to decide between being a psychology major and an English major. And Seth, I don't know what your background is, but neither one of those majors really translate directly into anything that can, for example, pay bills when you graduate without doing something else. And so I ended up majoring in psychology, minoring in English, and I had another minor in family and community services. Um, went back home for a year and served my home church as the temporary interim daycare director, and then started my graduate school career with Georgia State in Atlanta after that first year back. Um, was in the Atlanta area until 2008 when my husband and our oldest child moved up here for my doctoral internship. It was supposed to be a year long. It ended up being where we are. That I could in no way fathom moving back to Atlanta and trying to raise a family there after I'd been up here. Um,
I mean, hey,
with
the way things are going, we'll be Atlanta before too long. I mean, the growth rate
what
going
do you
on here.
mean when you say that?
The growth rate we're looking in here, and our inability to have functional traffic through most of town, it'll start feeling like Atlanta sooner than later.
And the idea, I don't know if you're familiar with Atlanta, but MARTA, the Metro Atlanta Rapid Transit
Mm-hmm.
Association, it's like this.
Right.
Like if you want to take MARTA, it's a cross. You can't really see what I'm doing. It's a T base, a plus sign. And so you can go to the 4 points. And if you want anywhere like between those things, you cannot really make that. And I don't know if you saw that CAT is um, reducing their routes, staffing, even their game day stuff lately.
Yeah,
And
I've heard about it.
with as much as we are growing in Knox County and the issue that we have with affordable workforce housing that is in an area that can access our public transit, it just amused me in the worst kind of way that we were pulling back on our transit, which we have to do. I mean, evidently there are shortages on staff, shortages on funding, shortages on creative solutions. But in that way, I can definitely see us being Atlanta with an almost functional, almost
Right. The potential's
really
there, but we just can't
beautiful.
quite get it to cross the finish line.
We
And
can't.
yeah,
And unless we start like very intentionally putting resources into that, we're not going to either. As long as it's an afterthought and a byproduct of anything else happening, we're not going to get really good. We're not going to get that kind of infrastructure, which we desperately need at this moment. But yeah, in that way, I can definitely see that we're becoming Atlanta. Um,
I mean, I'll admit that I didn't put any real thought. I just threw it out there, but it's not inaccurate now that we've discussed it. So what took from? What were you doing professionally? What have you been doing professionally since you finished your master's and stuff like that?
I finished my master's. I finished my EDS. I did not finish my doctoral degree, even though I came up here for the internship. I decided that I wanted to be in the trenches and not in private practice or academia. No offense to academics. It's school psychology. I have been a school psychology for 20 years, a school psychologist for more than 20 years in public schools I worked in Atlanta public schools. I worked in Blount County schools, Knox County schools. I supervised people all throughout the Atlanta metro area. I have worked in I'm awful with that word, rural schools.
That works.
Did you ever see 30 Rock where they kept talking about the rural juror? Um, rural schools, but and urban schools
Right.
as well. And so I think 10 of those years were in at least Tennessee, if not specifically Knox County schools. So that's what I was doing until 2018, when I had to take a medical leave of absence and then officially retired from Knox County in 2020. It was not related to the pandemic. Folks have asked if it was that, and it was not. But so then after that, I have worked to be an advocate for our public schools on a completely voluntary basis. And it's so voluntary that like nobody even really asked me to do it. I'm just doing it. It's just happening, both for my former colleagues, but for public education in general. I have a lot of faith in public education, not necessarily the people who are always making decisions for it, but in general as an institution. So I've been working to do that since I retired. I also have 3 kids, have 5 cats. We got a lot going on
Right,
here
right.
too.
That was to lead into the question of what made the decision to say this is time for me to run for office, to get into the actual elected official sphere. Because I don't know this for a fact, but I'm under the assumption that this is your first run at anything, at least at this level.
This is
politically.
absolutely my first run as a candidate for political office that isn't something like an officer in high school.
Right.
So it is. Part of it became becoming more educated about what my state house representative could do and what the incumbent had done. So that kind of awareness of what can be at stake for a position that is not glamorous. It is not really a power position, but it is definitely a seat at the table.
See, I don't know. I mean, I'd almost disagree with that. I think in the terms of the things that I hear people talk about caring about most, I think our state house and senate have the most influence on those things out of any of the other bodies, whether it's local mayor, city mayor, or even president of the United States for that matter. I would say that for me, I'm in District 18 and State Senate 6. Massey and Maness have more to do with my day-to-day life than either Mayor Jacobs or President Biden does, or even Burchett for that matter. And especially if we're going to get into school topics, I think realistically, the state reps are the number one in what's going on in our schools.
I think the bodies are collaboratively as a group. I do not think that necessarily individual assembly folks are the ones who have any kind of absolute power, even necessarily like even undue influence. But I think when you look at the House or the Senate as a team of people working together, definitely those 2 teams are the ones who have the most, honestly, the most authority in the state in most situations.
Right.
And so I agree with you in
that
way. That
one of the jokes that I've come up with over time is that it's not Knox County schools, it's Tennessee State Schools, Knox County division. Because it's really the state of Tennessee runs the schools. We just have a Knox County sub body, the school board. Because I think it's crazy. Like I don't think most parents of kids in Knox County schools understand how little school board has to do with what goes on, educationally, at least curriculum wise.
Well, I don't know so much if they don't understand as if they just are maybe blissfully ignorant. And
sure. That was me for 20 years.
It was me until the pandemic, for sure, in terms of understanding how the entirety of the school board, all of them together, affect, like, it doesn't matter who I vote for personally to represent me. It's the fact that once they come together, they are a body, and they absolutely were affecting my daily decisions um, during the pandemic related to, you know, do my kids need to be in person? Do they need to be, what precautions do we need to be taking? Things like that. And I think that a lot of us were very complacent um, until we started to see that there were day-to-day minutia type decisions that were being made that actually had a lot of an impact on our days then. And I think that that really there was a lot of momentum. There still is at this time for really trying to tap into that, and then making the choices that we can, where we are not hamstringed by the state, where the state has not interfered locally too much, what we can do um, from here. But you are absolutely right that there's a lot of things that are not even up for well, we can discuss them if we want to, but it
Right.
doesn't really matter. We can't vote on it. We can't affect how it's worded. We cannot really even ask for clarification or, um, you know, any kind of negotiation with the state because it is TCA. It's law. There's nothing we can do about it. But that doesn't mean that we don't try something, and that's part of why I am. So I think, like I said, I um, just became a lot more aware of what the role of a representative is and how important that is in guiding that body is the assembly, the General Assembly, in guiding what is happening on the ground in all of these places that we are, and very specifically for me in Knox County. And I felt like for the sake of my school age kiddos, which I don't know if you're aware, but there are very few um, General Assembly people in either the Senate or the House who actually have school age children, and even fewer who are mothers of school age children. So my oldest is a junior, my youngest is a third grader who goes to school at, we go to school together. We have a school in common. Um, and there aren't very many people at the table besides that who even have a background in public education who are making these decisions, and they have no real clue what they mean in the daily lives of families who are in public school.
Right. Okay. So
So
that
it's part of the
obviously,
reason. Yeah.
right. That obviously leans into that is a an agenda item for you when you get to the state is some of the stuff going on in school. So if you were to, I haven't been to your website. It's one of my shticks. I don't do research on purpose. Do you have like a what's your top 2, 3, 5 item agenda list of things when you're going knocking on doors and wanting to tell people what's the most important to you and why you want this seat? What are the top couple things?
Um, Public schools for one thing, and that includes fully funding them and supporting the teachers who are teaching in them and the administrators and the local school boards to make the decisions that they need to make. Um, Expanded healthcare. And for me, with my background in psychology, I very strongly include mental and behavioral health in basic health care. But at this time in Tennessee, I also have to very specifically include reproductive health care. You know, well, I'll tell you my three and then you can, these are just the top three that are kind of the biggest thing that I talk about. And then the third one um, is related to our gun laws, which is uh, which is a huge piece for me. So in terms of the first thing, our public schools, Tennessee has historically, over many years, underfunded what they committed to our local districts, all of them, that they would do. So local districts have been left in the position of trying to find money to make up for that loss or working around the loss in whatever way they can. Um, there is something with our school districts called maintenance of effort. Are you familiar with that
I feel like
principle?
I've heard the phrase, but you'll have to refresh me on it.
It just basically means that a school system can never do less than they've done before. They have to,
Yeah,
at a
right,
minimum,
right, yeah,
maintain their current investment in the district.
right.
Um,
Because that was something they were talking about on the new funding formula that potentially in the first couple of years it could be a significant increase as far as state contribution, but as time progresses, that it might end up falling more on the county, and the state will be pitching in less a percentage of the whole as they already are. I don't remember the math on it. I do know that at least for a period of time, I considered myself to be the most educated person in Knox County on how the BEP formula works, but I haven't figured out the TISA one yet. So we'll keep working on that.
you know what? I think that that might be intentional.
I'm certain it is, and
Even all of us um, who have studied that, who have been in it, like you get in it and you're like, it's kind of like when you've been to a location before and you're pretty sure you know how to get back there, but then you
right, you take that
get
one
in the
left that
middle
was
of
supposed to be a
driving
right.
and you're
Yeah,
like, this this doesn't look as familiar as I expected it to.
yeah.
Yeah, it
I made the joke to Ron in the school in at the school board about well, in the office, I guess, about how I respect him and I think he's a great dude, but I don't think he knows how they come up with the number. He just cashes the check when the state sends it.
oh, that is going to be incredibly accurate.
I
And
mean,
and that's no fault to him. It's
yeah,
no fault to anybody. It just is what it is. And so, but what we do know is that yes, it looks great on the outset, but the fact of the matter is that because of maintenance of effort, our school districts are going to have to find other ways to cover the funds because on top of so you can never be less than you were, but where are you getting the money to be the more that you have to be according to some of the regulations? And what TISA also has done is assigned dollar values to individual students, which is a whole other conversation that I could really get into. But what I'll mainly tell you is that the problem with that is it does not account for what we would like in a business situation would refer to as overhead or basic overhead types of things. So in a small business situation, you have your location, you have your rent, you have your Wi-Fi, you have your utilities, you have the copier that you rent or buy, you have the copy paper, like all of those kinds of things. And what they are doing is really only assigning it not to the location but to individual students, which means that our schools that have fewer students, for whatever reason, fewer high dollar students, and again, I'm not using that personally, are going to be um, at more of a disadvantage than they already are.
but wouldn't it? But because in my understanding of it is the high dollar students are going to be generally speaking either economically disadvantaged households, economically disadvantaged school districts themselves, special ed or special needs classroom students and stuff like that. So I would think that would actually that one to me actually sounds good, and maybe I don't understand it correctly, but that to me makes it so it'd be so the school of more need is going to get more high dollar students as you call them, where
I, not me,
like our
not me.
kids. Well, as you quoted somebody else of
Yeah.
calling it, but the high dollar students are the theoretically more needy students and more needy student bodies. So those schools will have more funds to help cover those kind of things. Where the students that have the less need, which tend to, at least as I've noticed, have a better involved local community, better PTOs and stuff like that. Anyway, to make up the difference, it sounds to me reasonable. I may be misunderstanding it.
Except that the things that have been cited by the state as things that would produce higher dollar per student are things that already have federal funding attached to them, whereas your average everyday students don't necessarily have that. And so what it does is that it can lead to um, the creation of additionally needful schools that weren't there before, that because they have had resources removed that they have been counting on. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is that particularly some of our more vulnerable students are highly transient. And so when you assign the money to the student, there are huge issues in terms of how do you allocate like portions of that student's money to some schools at some times, or if they're only there for a week prior to the census on September 1st, that school gets all of their money while they in fact may be being served at another school. There are too many un unexplored issues with doing it this way, but it has been handed to districts to say this is how you have to accommodate this. And then beyond that, TISA does absolutely nothing to increase funding, despite the fact that Tennessee has literally billions of dollars in our rainy day fund, nothing to increase across the board salaries for our educators in order to, we're in a huge shortage in Tennessee, not just Tennessee, but and even very specifically Knox County right now. Again, I don't know if you're aware. I talk about a lot of things, like I assume that people know all about it, but staffing is a factor. We aren't paying our educators what they're worth, what they do, and we are not paying to attract the folks that really want to succeed as well. So you need to be doing both things. And that's why looking at student achievement only, literally those test scores, is such a fallacious understanding of the whole of the problem. But that's what TISA does, is it tries to make it into a very big thing, into this very little thing that still doesn't fully fund our schools and still puts local districts and counties on the hook for basically covering for what Tennessee said that they would do, but then they didn't do.
Right, but still says that you have to come up with somewhere, but we're not going to pitch in our side. I always joke, that was my other joke with a bunch of school board people when the new superintendent search started going down. I was like, let's hire a lawyer to just sue the state continuously for the money that they promised for schools, and let's just make that our superintendent choice. Who cares how they run the classrooms or anything like that? Let's just go get our money. That was my, again, joke on that one, but that was one of my shticks on that. Okay, so I mean, it's obvious that education is a big portion of your platform.
Yes.
And
what was number two?
Number two was reproductive rights.
And healthcare.
And healthcare rights, because I know, and I know it's a local left issue as far as the it is something I can't remember. I always say mix them up. Medicare expansion that's already in play, but we have not accepted it as the state of Tennessee. That's been a continuous. I mean, that's been on the conversation block for a couple of years now, at least as I've started paying attention. And so, I mean, that seems like a gimme to me too, but maybe I don't understand it either. I don't understand why we wouldn't say yes to money. Like I always, it's a perfect example. Currently, I think we have like $6,000 of student loan left in this household. And if this Biden thing finishes off, we get to pay that off.
Wonderful.
I have philosophical issues with why and who's and how's and this kind of thing and what's going on with this. But when the Biden administration says, here's your check, I'm going to take it. So That's the same attitude I have with this Medicare thing. If the federal government's handing out cash, we should be taking it.
But you're assuming that the people who are in charge of this care about Tennesseans.
Okay. I mean,
and that's where I'm not so sure that we really have folks in Nashville who truly do. Because if we did, we would not be putting a metaphorical foot down against opportunities that can really help some of our most vulnerable Tennesseans. And that's what the Medicare expansion can do. Um, and again, doesn't cost us anything, but some folks a little bit of pride. And I'm not somebody who is necessarily interested in winning at the expense of somebody else's health, livelihood, family, those types of things.
Right.
And it's very frustrating. But in my specific case right now, in terms of, oh, and by the way, congratulations on your student loan debt. I want you to know I am Gen X. I had student loans. I paid off student loans, and I am thrilled for everybody who is going to be able to take advantage of this. And that is because of the predatory interest rates. A lot of people don't
See,
realize that
I agree. I agree with you, but that's what frustrates me about this. Like, it's like, yes, I'm going to take this cash, I'm going to get it squared away for me, but
we need
the
to
kids,
fix the problem.
right? The kids at UT that started this week or last week or whatever, that this is their first year in college, they're going to be in the same shithole that we were in and we've been digging out for the last whatever number of years. It doesn't change the it helps out a little bit right now for those of us that have already been through it, but it's not changing the what built the problem in the first place.
One of the things that might help our Tennessee high school students as they are having to navigate that whole process would be the funding for really in-depth real life coursework related to how to understand in real life what people are going to be offering you when it comes to credit cards, when it comes to student loans, when it comes to car leases, all of those things.
I've had multiple employees who are adults, so 21, 22-year-old employees who can't write checks. Like, they don't know how to write a check. And this goes back to our education conversation. It's like, I know it's the new millennium and we're all computers and we can cash at people stuff and whatever nowadays, but no, checks are still a thing.
Fundamentals.
And to the idea that these children graduated high school not knowing how to write a check, it really blew my mind. And it's like, well, of course, a person who doesn't understand how to write a check how could they understand finances well enough to understand this long-term giant loan for a thing that is ethereal and almost demanded at this point? Because that was my issue with college is that it was like a demand. It wasn't a question. It wasn't it's an option for you to, after high school. It's you're going to college or you'll be a loser.
This is happening.
Right. Yeah. And then to put the predatory loan on top of, well, if I can't, but I don't want to be a loser, I'm going to take it anyway. And then you have those people that go and get 2.5 years in and can't hack it and probably knew they couldn't hack it in the first place. And then they're stuck with the debt and nothing to show for it.
I really had started encouraging as many families as I could to, before I was out of high schools, to take advantage of our 2 years. It's not completely free, but it is 2 years in our community college level that the state of Tennessee does give to Tennessee graduates. It does affect your Hope Scholarship if you have that, but that at least starts you out with 2 years of your solid prereqs for your good major courses without having to go necessarily into tremendous debt. And that is one thing that I think Tennessee is doing really well. And I think that one of the things that we're also hopefully doing is that we are providing more opportunities than just necessarily a liberal arts college education after you graduate from high school. There are a lot of ways to be a productive member of society, and they don't always come with a BA degree. So those are things that I think are looking good, and hopefully will help some folks from being in the kind of situation that you're describing. I don't know if you graduated from a Tennessee high school, so it might not be specific to you, but
I did, but it was before. I graduated the year before the lottery scholarship started kicking in, and so I was ineligible. Now my wife, on the other hand, and she's the one that actually are holding debt for. My parents helped with mine, so I didn't have any debt for school myself. But she took on some and then didn't end up graduating in the initial portion, And then when she went back to school, she was then eligible for some of the scholarship stuff, even though we graduated at the same time. So like as a junior at UT, I couldn't pull any of the scholarship because it was continuous. But if I'd taken a break and then started again, I could have pulled some of those scholarships that became available because of the lottery program, which
And
is
I
kind of
think
weird.
that, well, the other thing is that people completely forget that our brains aren't necessarily completely developed in terms of all of these reasoning and processing issues until a lot of us are 25. And so we are asking people to make really big life decisions without giving them the tools to understand that, without giving them the options, and particularly for folks who maybe don't need to jump straight into post-secondary education, we aren't really giving them good um, opportunities for taking some gap years. And I don't mean that in the European way of where you take your gap year and you go backpack around and you're just lolling on somebody's couch, but maybe, just exploring some other things so that when they are ready, they don't have those kinds of gaps too. But I have gotten way off.
Yeah, we were talking
Oh,
about
healthcare.
healthcare and such. Yeah.
So part of what we have been seeing are, even before the pandemic, are huge increases in adolescent, and that means like high school and college suicides, mental health needs, all of these things kind of wrapping into each other. And I have a lot of theories about why. But what we don't do enough of, and I mean as a community, not just in the schools or in the post-secondary institutions, is really support our current generation that we have of folks that age in the ways that they need from an emotional and behavioral and psychological standpoint. A lot of what we do is pretty outdated because we just don't have like the newer things, but we have our Gen Z is a very different generation than um, any that has come before it, particularly in terms of access to media, in terms of social media, in terms of how connected the world is globally. And we don't address those things. We don't have good supports for those things. We have things that, number one, we don't have enough providers. Number two, the providers that we have are typically using strategies that they would have used with um, in the 90s or the early aughts that don't really resonate with our current teenagers. Um, they're so we're putting a lot of energy towards that, but often it's kind of the wrong energy.
Right.
So a lot of what I firmly believe is that we need to be taking advantage of opportunities and making it a focus to be able to provide relevant, um, efficient, and meaningful um, mental and behavioral health supports that are subsidized from the state, and that offer ways that offer more providers, support providers coming in, give them the tools to be able to reach that generation the way that it needs to be reached, and that has like a really detailed relationship with the agencies and organizations that are already there, um, who are providing those types of services in the best way that they can right now, which would be, so like in our area, you have Cherokee, Helen Ross McNabb, um, as sort of the larger folks. The schools do have um, some level of screening and what I would say is educational therapy, because the schools are not meant to be, inpatient treatment that folks need. So it's a lot of coping strategies related to keeping you functional in the educational setting. So while you're at school, you could be cool for whatever you need to do, but it's not necessarily looking at the whole of everything. We have tremendous issues with substance abuse that are increasing and are changing that we need to address. And when we say no thank you to funding that could improve this, then we are saying that this is not important to us, and they are not important to us. They are not important enough to us for us to accept this opportunity.
Right.
And that's where I feel like if you can look at these facts and you can look at that and say, I'm okay with saying no because I'm mad about who's offering it. That's what I fundamentally don't understand about politicians. And so
Yes, I mean yes, I mean that's just a constant. I don't, I can't fathom some of the stuff that we've seen, trying to watch different things go through, and it's like, oh well, that person said it, so no, and then I said it, so yes, because they're on my team. I hate, like,
do that.
I am as anti-partisan as I can try to be, and it's sadly it's unfunctional. It's unfunctional trying to stay out of this team game. And I don't know. That's kind of why I'd fallen into this trap of wanting to talk to everybody, because I'm trying to understand how the persistence of this partisanship is for the greater good, which I don't see it anymore. I haven't seen it in years. And it's easier to it's easy here in Tennessee to have a point one way or the other just because of the consistency of the color of the state of Tennessee, but I don't. It's not a left or right thing. It's both sides have their own. It's just different places have more of one than the other. And so I don't know what the solution on some of that is, but I agree with you on the premise of this sub point of that. So continuing on to healthcare, obviously the Dobbs decision has been a huge impact, and it's probably going to be a huge bonus impact for local Democrats because it's got an activation quality for the base. And so, I mean, I have an assumption on where you're at on this, but please talk to me about it.
I just told you I don't understand politicians because I'm not a politician. I am a lifelong.
You are now
servant over here. No, I'm in politics. That's a different thing. I'm running for office, but what it does, and see, I hate to say that what I really want to do is go back to Nashville and fix every fool thing we've done, because number one, I can't. But number two, one of the biggest fool things that we've done is we put in place a trigger ban, which is live now.
Right, as of a week ago.
No, I'm sorry, what?
As of kicked in a week ago.
Yeah, but has no exceptions, none for rape, incest, and child abuse victims. No exceptions for not only the life of the mother, but the reproductive future of the mother, which I think a lot of people don't understand that piece in terms of the things that can go wrong with a pregnancy that would require a procedure that is identified as an abortion by people who are politicians.
Well, the way this thing kicks in, as I understand it, is that it's essentially a ban with it, but it leaves the door open to an affirmative defense for a healthcare provider to say that they perform said abortion, and then but it still puts the burden of proof on the provider to say, I performed said abortion, and here's why, and it has to hit the threshold of the life and future whatever of the mom.
Well, and people, I don't think, are fully understanding what that does to a practitioner in that moment. They have to decide, am I ready to get charged with a crime? Am I ready to jeopardize my career, my livelihood, my colleagues, my institution to perform this procedure, and then go have to justify that, not in front of other professionals or practitioners, but to a jury of people who do not know and do not understand emergency health care in reproductive situations or anything. I mean, you may have somebody on the jury who is also an obstetrician or gynecologist, but the chances of that are unlikely.
Oh, I'm pretty sure prosecution would boot that juror if they could.
you are not wrong. So they have to, so it's in that moment, not just a decision about what is best for this patient in front of me, what is going to save their life, what is going to save their ability to be able to have children in the future, what is the right thing to do? The question becomes, what is the right thing to do for this person, intersected with what are the implications for me, for my practice, for my colleagues, for my license, for my career, for my reputation, for my family. It becomes a whole bigger thing
Okay, well,
because
let
they
me.
are, in fact, charged with that crime. They then have to defend themselves,
Right.
but defend themselves to people who are not in that situation, who do not have their training, do not, it's not like a morbidity and mortality review at the hospital with your own
Right.
colleague, you know.
And so let
Sorry.
me ask it this way then. So if the opportunity was to get it, everything stays the same except exceptions written in for, as you wrote, as you just said, it was rape, incest, child
And
abuse,
child abuse. Yep.
and then the health and safety of the mother or whatever. But it's still a full ban otherwise. Would that be enough?
Not for me personally. I think it would be it's a start to correct an incredible um, ethical error. But then I think beyond that, you go into policy questions. And so that's, for me personally, no. I think that a woman and her healthcare provider should have the option to access the right reproductive care if she is pregnant, if the person is pregnant, up through viability. That's between them. That should have nothing to do with me. Up to viability of the fetus, where we start calling that a baby, and that's somewhere between 22 and 26 weeks. And but up to that time, it's not up to me. It's between that woman and her healthcare provider, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I am.
No, I don't
But
disagree.
again,
I just think I think the problem I have with the conversation is that, and this is Max on the Big Show. He said this to me many moons ago, and it's like that. It's often a conversation where it's two different conversations that go past each other, and this is not uncommon in a number of issues, but abortion being one of the big ones that happens. And it's two different conversations that seem to intersect, but they don't quite. And like right now, especially with everything going on, the no exception is where everybody's drawing the line, and it's like, well, okay, I can understand that part of it, but that's not what you want either. And so I would rather hear the argument for what you want as the corrected version of it than the complete rebuttal of the other side. Does that make sense? Which you already did answer. I'm just saying that's why I ask it that way, because it's not even a point of me agreeing or disagreeing with your take on it. It's that I want to know what the correct answer is to you.
The first part of the answer is that we have a huge ethical human rights piece that we need to correct. We need to get that fixed, and that is, again, that affects everybody. The idea that I have an 11-year-old right now, and so what we are seeing in the news are the 11-year-olds who are unable to get a no questions asked, a no limit, who aren't able to get those kinds of abortions. And I will tell you that carrying a baby, I've carried 3. It is not just you get pregnant and then there's 9 months of question mark and then baby at the end. It's like what is it? The underpants gnomes from South Park, where they're like, underpants, question, 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 profit. So a lot of people think, the act of creating a baby, 9 months, baby, and they're not thinking about the toll that carrying a baby takes on the parent's body, and the long-term effects of having done that linger way beyond labor and delivery. And so particularly for our minors who could not have given consent in the first place, it was non-consensual, but whose bodies are still very much developing, forcing them to carry a child to term, even if it's to give it up for adoption, is damaging. It damages their body. It changes their body in ways that can never be recovered and leads to so many other increased risks. And so, again, for me, the very first thing we have to do is correct the unethical lack of exceptions that we have right now.
Right, and I'm not. And again, this is not a policy disagreement, and I think to me, what to throw a pile on top from in a personal point of mine, I think the idea of a trigger law should be banned in the first place. The idea that a decade ago some people can come up with an idea, and if some random thing happens and this new law kicks in, a decade of things has changed between when we wrote this thing and when it's available to happen. Like the idea that those are is an acceptable form of making laws in a state sounds ridiculous to me in and of itself. Like I just think it's stupid.
All that is political points without any responsibility.
Right.
That's what that is.
Right, because
That's
I can
why
vote for
people-
the thing. I can vote for the thing and get the brownie points from my team or whatever, but I don't have to deal with the consequences of it actually being enacted.
But see, those are politicians, and I don't understand why politicians do that. But for people who have been in public service, who are there to really try to help their neighbors, which is what you're supposed to be doing, that's not even a question. You're not going to participate in shenanigans. You shouldn't be, in my opinion. But then again, I'm not elected yet. Maybe I changed my mind.
Right. All right. So we got.
But I don't think so.
All right. So just because I got to cover a couple more things. You said third was your guns thing, and so give me the brief version of that because I'll probably want to argue with you a lot, but I'll try to keep it short.
I am a huge fan of the Second Amendment. I have grown up with guns. I am a gun owner. My favorite part of the Second Amendment is well regulated. What I'm not okay with is a lack of background checks. I'm not okay with teenagers being allowed to, I'm not okay with most people being able to casually buy military grade firearms. I am not okay with 18-year-olds in Tennessee being able to get an assault weapon legally, which they can do through the gun show loophole at this point in time, and carry it concealed because there's no permitting for it's permitless carry at this point in time. I think that we have made some significant common sense mistakes with our
Okay, so
lack of restrictions in Tennessee, and I think we need to fix it.
We'll wander off of guns sort of for just a second because this is a broader issue that I don't understand. I don't understand when are you an adult in America?
Oh, you shouldn't ask a psychologist.
I mean, but realistically, like it drives me crazy because it could cover almost everything we've talked about today in different portions here and there. You can cover healthcare stuff because in the state of Tennessee, what is it? At least you can at 14 you can get a vaccine without your parents' consent or something like that. You can do some healthcare stuff on your own at like 14 in Tennessee.
Through the mature minor, there's some things that a healthcare provider would have to go through with you, and it's not just any 14-year-old can go up and say, "I'd like a vaccine, please." It's
but
not
you
a
can,
drive-through situation,
you can go to jail as an adult at 14 or 15 in the state of Tennessee. You can do this, but you can't smoke cigarettes. You can't drink beer until you're 21. You can buy a gun at 18, but you can't buy a certain types of gun until you're 21, but I think that's other states, not Tennessee.
You can serve in the military at 18, but you cannot drink till you're 21.
So again, the moral of the core of the question is how again, this is maybe what you blame on politicians is how can we not have a consistent age of what an adult is? Like when are you to be treated like an adult and when not? Because you're not smart enough to not take a massive loan for no reason at 17 or 18. But you are saddled with it anyway. But you are smart enough to do. It's very confusing to me.
Well, it's not smart. It's not smart or not smart. That smart is the wrong word to think about.
Mature.
So, what maturity in some way, but it's that cognitive maturity, that processing maturity, that ability to problem solve, the ability to plan, the ability to research and make an educated decision. And like I said before, there are plenty of us who are very typical, who aren't really ready to do those things completely independently until 25, just based on development, based on typical developmental needs. So I got married when I was 25. So I would hate to say that 25 is the like, you have to be 25 to be an adult kind of thing. We let folks drive at 16 independently, but we don't let them vote. It's a huge question, and in a lot of ways it needs to be examined in the light of the effects of letting someone who is not ready for whatever that responsibility is that we are talking about at the moment. What are the effects if the vast majority of people at this age are not ready for that responsibility? How does that affect the community? What does that do to us if we have a bunch of folks out doing this? If we suddenly raised or lowered the um, age to drive to 12, what would be the benefits and what would be the harms to the community of having a bunch of 12-year-olds independently operating vehicles? Now, you and I both know, hey, I started driving when I was 8. Okay. It was the country, it was Alabama, it was a different time. So 12-year-old Amanda would have been fine behind the wheel, probably better than a lot of folks older than that. Now, I don't know what 12-year-old Seth was like, or if 12-year-old, or if Seth, if you had some sort of sibling that you can't imagine have, been behind that, known a 12-year-old who would be a nightmare in a bumper car, much less, an actual vehicle. And so the problem becomes that we start making laws for 12-year-old Amandas when maybe that's not the typical experience of that age. And maybe it doesn't need to be an age at all. Maybe it needs to be something else. So when I'm thinking about people who, I am about responsible gun ownership. That includes a bunch of things: knowing your weapon, knowing how to clean it, knowing how to use it, knowing when to use it, knowing the right ammunition, knowing how to store it, knowing how to maintain it, knowing how to keep it safe around all these other people. Maybe the requirement isn't an age requirement, but it's demonstrating that kind of responsibility in some other way. Maybe if you, these are maybes. This is not my platform. I really want to.
Good. That's it's a winning show for me if I get you off of what you're planning on saying. So I'll take it.
I'm just saying that, maybe a responsible gun owner, which is what the community wants, is responsible gun owners, responsible people who can use the weapon responsibly in the right place at the right time and are not going to take it to CAK's football game like we recently had, where weapons are not allowed no matter what. Maybe you have a driver's license. Maybe you have already graduated high school or have a GED, have an equivalent. Maybe you are employed. Maybe you are in the military. Maybe, I don't know, other things. Maybe you have some sort of additional certification or training in an occupation. I mean, maybe there are other ways that we can look for the things that we want to see in our neighbors that aren't dependent on their date of birth.
Right. I get it. Okay.
It sounds like what you were saying.
Right. Okay. Like I said, I think it's an interesting. It's one of the struggles I have when we get into talking about stuff, because everything's got these weird age limits and it just doesn't make its inconsistency drives me crazy on stuff like that.
Interesting.
So my last major one that I want to know about is so I think it was one of the reps from Memphis in this last session was trying to get a ballot poll put in, and it didn't get passed. But it was a ballot poll that's just discussing. I think it's going to be 3 questions about marijuana in the state of Tennessee. It's going to be something along the lines of: should we have medicinal, recreational, or both in the state of Tennessee? And that was supposed to be an informative, poll question on the ballot that didn't get added. And so I'm in the weed adjacent business. That's my day job. And So I have I have personal interest in it, and so I'm curious where, because again, as we realize watching Colorados and Californias and stuff like that, the state legislature is the one that can make this happen in our state or not. And so where are
Mhm.
you at in getting weed in the state of Tennessee legally procured for people, and how?
I think that this is another situation where I have to use that naughty word, intersectionality, where we have a situation where definitely there are medical benefits to um, the whole family. And we have a bunch of folks that we are paying to incarcerate who have committed relatively minor crimes related to this thing. And then on top of all of that, we have a lot of violence in our Tennessee urban areas related to an um,
The industry of
illegal
providing
drug
these
trade.
products. Yeah.
So for me, now, the other part of it, though, is that we do know that when you legalize recreational use increases, which can or cannot have, uh,
Now,
depending on where you lay on that, folks can like that or not. And again, I am not really somebody who, even when I am not getting over COVID and don't have bronchitis, I don't really drink a lot. I don't smoke. And have I will be very honest that I have literally never ever smoked weed in my whole entire life because I have been afraid. I'm interested in it and I do have some, medical situations that might be improved. But I have the fear, Steph, the fear
no, you were raised on it.
from my first job at Blockbuster when they,
Yeah.
to screen you, they cut your hair to drug test. And so I was 16 and I will never ever smoke because
And we wonder why
somebody,
Blockbuster's not around anymore.
right. Well, it wasn't the only reason, but so for me, legalizing it makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. I do not think that that means that there is going to be a whole, what was there was that awful, awful propaganda from the maybe 40s, the reefer madness. I don't think have you seen that?
I've not.
The,
I've got hours that I don't have time to do other things in that I'd prefer to do than watch a bad movie from the 70s.
no, like from the 40s. It's called Reefer Madness. You're gonna want to look it up.
Okay.
Um,
I've
and
I've heard of it. I just have
it
not seen it.
really lays out marijuana as basically the demon of the home, the enemy of the home, the demon of a good, healthy, functioning society, and it's actually super racist. So it I think that there's a lot of reasons that legalizing it makes sense, and I would support that, even though it doesn't really affect me personally at this point in my life.
Okay, that's what I was curious about. Now, I normally have 5 questions, but I don't have my list. I can't remember them all. Number one is the history of you in politics. You've already said it clearly. This is your first time running for anything. Now, after you win, is this the beginning of a long run for you, or is it going to be a couple terms and call it a career, or what's the plan?
I My plan is to make the best use of the 2 years that my neighbors give me to represent them in Nashville. And then if I can continue to be helpful in that way, I'm going to continue to do that. But I don't have a plan to be a career politician. I actually am also a huge fan of term limits. So that's, that would negate that anyway as an option um, for me personally. But I don't, I want to be able to make a difference right now and
Okay.
then see where we are. If there's still more to do, then I will keep doing it. And if they feel confident that I can continue to do that for them.
Okay. Number two is what's your favorite place to eat around here?
I About 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with allergies to onion and garlic.
Oh,
So this really affects my answer
it's really
because
sad.
where
That's the most depressing thing I've heard in a while.
I'm still struggling with it. I have not made peace with it, and I get very angry about it. But so right now, it's more about restaurants that are able to accommodate that. When we do eat out, I will say Polancho's is able to do that. I can't necessarily have salsa or guacamole, but I can still have a really tasty quesadilla that doesn't have onion and garlic in it over there. We love Casa del Gallo and Rocky Hill, and they can do that. Perros used to be able to, but they got a little busy and aren't always able to do it. I if we go like into Turkey Creek to eat, Red Robin is able to. I know that's a chain restaurant, but they've got several good things. I can't have my Jack whiskey wrap that I love, but I can have a really good BLTA. And so my favorites are limited to where I can really, really
All right.
eat.
Well, then
Oh,
the number three is a safe one. Is what's your favorite ice cream? Because we shouldn't have to worry about
ooh,
our garlic and onions in that one.
no, and that means that I do eat it. If you give me the basic three, vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry, I'm typically going to choose vanilla, but I'm kind of a butter pecan, cherries, jubilee kind of girl. I like
Okay.
something a little different.
All right.
Not really, yeah.
Oh, I'm like I said, I don't have my list in front of me, so I'm trying to remember my list while we're going. Um, four is tell me about a Republican locally that's in office right now that you like some of the work that they've done.
Becky Massey represents me. And honestly, when I started looking into what my opponent was doing as a representative, as my House representative versus how I don't agree with her on everything, but she seeks out the opinions of her constituents. She's responsive. She tries to, I think, be objective and fair. And I have really admired that
I was
um,
I was very impressed with her
personally.
when we first got started. She was one of the first couple people that I reached out to do an interview with. That she was like, it was like, oh, it's like episode 7. You want to come do it? She's like, sure, yeah, let's do it. I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I was very impressed with that out of her as well. All right, and so then number 5 is I think I switched 4 and 5, but do you feel like partisanship is an important aspect to me, the voter, for your race in District 14?
What I will say is that I had many Republicans sign my petition to run, and I have many Republican donors. So I feel like in my personal race, in the race that I am in, it's a lot more about character and ethics and responding to the needs of the community than necessarily your party.
Okay.
However, I'm also in D14, and a lot of people are going to vote R no matter what. Um, but for me personally, I used to be a Republican. Obama was the first president that I voted for who was not a Republican, and that started my slide into independence, and then the long slide into accepting that I am indeed a Democrat. But the Republican Party is a completely different entity than it was when I was a Republican. Um, so I guess what I would say is that I can no longer be affiliated with them from an ethical point of view. I believe that we are here, we are called to love, to work together, to show love to our neighbors. We are not called to make legislation that is about hate and is about excluding others. I believe that we're here to try to work together collaboratively and peacefully. And I don't see that right now with our Tennessee Republican Party. So I think for some people that has come into play.
Okay. All right. Give me take like a minute or two and do your plugs, your website, any way you want people to contact you and learn more about your campaign, and then we'll outro
Yeah.
out of here.
Okay. I would love for folks who are interested in finding out more about the rest of my platform and finding out a little bit more about me to visit amandafortn.com. And that's FOR, not the number 4. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Amanda4TN. Um, and those are the places where you can really kind of get to know me a little bit better. I do also have, well, anyway, get to know me a little bit better um, on that kind of day-to-day basis. But I would love for anybody who has any questions to email me at elect@amandafortn.com, and we will get back to you. I really want to talk to folks, especially because sometimes I feel like the issues that are most important to me aren't necessarily as universally important. So I don't want to leave anybody out.
Well, cool.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate you taking the time. This was fun. I hope you enjoyed your first podcast experience.
I did. It was awesome. It was a great conversation, Seth. I appreciate it. Next time we should do it in a real place when we don't have COVID and with actual alcohol, because your website promises beer. There's no beer here.
I mean, it's your house. I can't. I have beer here. I have all sorts of drinks here. Anyway, we're not in the mood to do it. We're not in the shape to do it. But anyway, thanks again, and we will talk to you guys soon.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Amanda Collins, everybody, District 14, coming up here in November, if you're in District 14. Also, go to our website, almostinagreement.com. The Election Guide 22 is there. It's going to have a link to this show, as well as all the other shows that I do for the upcoming election. And there's links to KGIS and Knox County Election Commission, so you can double-check your polling place, make sure you're registered, and like what seats you actually get to vote for, so you're not confused. Because I don't get to vote for Amanda Collins because I'm not in her district. But we do share Senator Massey, but she's not on the ballot. So we're Almost in Agreement, gmail.com, almostinagreement@gmail.com. Go to Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, look us up, give us a like and share there. Go to your favorite podcast provider, listen to us there as well. Tell your friends about us, help us get the word out. We're going to keep doing more shows, and I'm going to get some more interviews before this November race. And I'm still working on trying to get Manister Massey to come in and help me with the election, the ballot items, so we can understand what yes or no actually means on those votes. So we appreciate everybody. Have a great afternoon.